Welcome to the Bad Roman Podcast. On this show, we talk with veterans, community leaders, Christians and non-Christians as we explore the entanglement of Christians with the state. The Bad Roman Project was created out of the firm belief that as Christians, we are called to follow Christ, not the state. Here is your host, Craig Hargis.
Hey folks, today we welcome Joseph Macolino back on the show. If you remember, Joseph was on episode 103 to discuss his Everath trilogy and how the books show how a society can transition into a voluntary society. Joseph is going to tell us all about a new series he has put together titled Legends of Everath and how this society looks like what Christian community looks like as seen in the book of Acts. I find it fascinating how Joseph can use fiction writing to get a message of no king but Christ across.
Let's go. Yeah. Left, right, left, right, left. We got our marching orders, man. Left, right, left, right. We'd rather serve God than serve Caesar, you feel me? Right. I'm just trying to live what he said. I'm just trying to live.
Joseph, how are you doing?
Great. It's great to be back here, Craig. How are you?
Not doing too bad. Busy. It seems like it's nonstop with the project and now the salsas. I think the salsa may be busier than the podcast now.
Hey, that's a good problem to have. I'm excited to see what's happening with the salsa. That's pretty cool.
It is cool, and it is a good problem to have. I didn't really know what I was getting into, to be honest with you. It was a hobby I was doing for myself, and then people started taking notice, and now it's a side hustle. And what's cool about it is it helps me generate conversation with folks who are Christians, especially out of like the farmers markets, and they have this idea of this shirt I'm wearing, this No King but Christ shirt. If I wear it out to one of the farmers markets, they see it and it generates a conversation. They like it, but in the back of my head, I've said this over and over. I said, "But do you really understand what it means, though?" You know what I'm saying? So like, it's cool that it's giving me the opportunity to have one-on-one conversation with folks to talk about No King but Christ and tell them about the project. One of the most frequent questions I get from these people is like, where did the Bad Roman come from? Where did this name come from? I said, well, the salsa is just kind of a byproduct of a project that I've been working on for 4 years now. And so it gives me the opportunity to tell them about the podcast. So I'm getting new listeners, and I don't know if they're going to like everything that I have to say on the podcast because it's new information to a lot of Christians, as you know. And we're going to talk about that today a little bit too. But, you know, this community building that you are very passionate about, and I think it's a great idea. You sent me some notes. I'm going to have it pulled up on my phone, and we're just going to go through that. But before we do that, how have you been? What's going on with Joseph? And since you've been on episode 103, so we're at episode 117 now at the time it's recording, how have you been?
Good. Yeah, no, I'm trying to remember how old my son was when I last recorded, but he's 18 months now, and seeing a toddler, like he's actually starting to, I don't know if he's quite there, but he has started to use the toilet. So like he's starting to show an interest in being potty trained, like, and he's babbling. Most of it's incoherent garbage. Like you can't understand it, but like he's trying to communicate. And it's so funny. I'll watch music with him. That's like one of our things every night. I sit down, put on YouTube, and watch some music videos. And I mean, I introduced him to real music. So he's listening to System of a Down. He's listening to the Cranberries. He's listening to I keep trying to get him to listen to some Beatles, but he won't listen to any. But I mean, I've introduced him to Pink Floyd. But it's funny, like some of the songs he gets into, and he'll like be obsessed. Recently, he's been obsessed with Smoke on the Water. And he just, one day, I swear he listened to it like 5-6 times in that day. He just wanted to hear it over and over again. But it's just so interesting seeing that young mind, like learning about the world, again, babbling. And it's like, does it make sense to you what you're saying? Or like, do you even know what you're asking for? Are you just trying to practice? So again, it's like that. Is he just practicing speech? Or is he actually communicating? It's just all fascinating, though.
Yeah, it is. It's I bet that is cool to kind of watch them kind of come into their own. I mean, you're very creative, so he might get some of that stuff from you, and he might be an artist of some sort. Maybe he's going to make some music. Maybe he's trying to learn how to sing right now.
My wife will play sometimes an old CD from High School Musical. When she puts it on, he'll like start singing to it. I don't know if I should imitate it. He'll just be like, woo, woo, like, but he'll do it like clockwork. When it gets to this part of the song, he'll like try to sing it, and it's pretty adorable to see him again just grow and learn.
All right, so let's get into these notes you sent me about community building and buying a whole bunch of land. It might sound a little cultish to a lot of people, buying a big plot of land and everybody build their own houses on this land and live in this community, do their own thing, and work voluntarily together. But I think cultish is a bad way to describe that, especially when you consider how the early church operated. I mean, the early church operated exactly what how we're going to talk about today. So let's get into these notes a little bit. And well, actually, let's do this. Why don't you kind of just lay out what you envision what this would look like to Joseph and how it would work. Then we're going to get into these notes that you sent me.
And the first thing I'd say, too, before going into my vision is that, like, I think there are variants of this, right? There are different strokes for different folks, as the old adage goes, right? So it's not like there's a one-size-fits-all, this is how every community would look. But the idea is just, again, going back to the Church of Acts, like, and even not even looking back to the Church of Acts, like, look at how neighborhoods are organized today. Like, people sign up to buy a house with a quarter acre or less usually, and just have a bunch of dozens of neighbors surrounding them who they've never met before. That, to me, is much weirder than the concept of, hey, why don't, instead of doing that, we get some like-minded individuals who believe in no king but Christ, who believe that voluntarism is the way, not force, not coercion, not stealing from Peter to pay Paul, the people who actually want to live out that gospel life, that early church. Why don't we intentionally buy some land? Everyone, depending on what they want to do, there'd be people in there that now I'm going to slowly transition into my vision. There's a guy, let's say one of the guys is an electrician. Well, he might just want half an acre or something to set up his house and set up his land. And his whole job is to make sure everyone in that community has electricity and has that set up. And that might be it. And then there would be a plumber in the same boat. But then there would be someone like me who has goats already, wants to get a cow, has chickens, who might, I might have 5-10 acres. And in my 5-10 acres, I have that goats, I have the cow, I have some other livestock, I have a garden that I do. And then again, everyone in the community, one of the things that if we lived close together, I'd be peddling some peppers to you, because that's one of the things that I can grow. Like peppers, and I don't know if it's partially the Florida climate, might just be really easy to grow peppers, because they are, not only are they easy to grow, but they're the one crop that we've had success with that deer and rabbits are constantly eating on us. But again, not everyone needs to do the same thing either. And I think that's part of, unfortunately, what happens a lot of time with anarchists, voluntarists, any of us who like that individual liberty, which is important. And it's, to some extent, it's like the most important thing. That doesn't mean you just shun everyone else and you're somehow in a bubble. You still need other people to interact with. So again, I can only do so much. Like, I have multiple goats. I milk them. I make cheese. We make yogurt. But the cost benefit to that, if you add another family on that's living in the same area as me, who says, hey, yeah, let's go in together and do this together, we end up being able to feed both families for probably a 10% additional cost versus just feeding my family, right? Because what happens is at scale, and it's all just economy at scale to some extent, and just a practical analysis that, hey, we can't literally have olive trees to get our olive oil and have cows and have chickens and we can't do it all, right? But in a community setting, everyone can kind of be like, oh, well, I love doing this. Oh, and I love doing that. Y'all kind of contribute, work together. And again, there's not that everyone gets their own space. There's still private property. And this is the thing you mentioned, like, people think of cults. That's what always ends up happening. You bring this up and immediately they go to like, oh, you want to create some communist or some cult thing. It's like, no, everyone still has their own property, their own land, their own responsibilities. I'm not saying we all trade wives or something crazy, but I have no interest in that. Trust me. But that's what you get, right? Whenever you bring up this sort of community, people always push back to these crazy extremes. And I just don't get it. Because when you look at the church acts, and as I've been reading that more lately, as I'm kind of digging into Acts and studying that, it's like, this is what they did. They gathered together in this common community. They didn't just try to accumulate wealth. Any wealth they accumulated, they put it to building this community of Christ. And so that's kind of where I'm at.
No, this is awesome, because this is something that I've going back to the salsa thing. Now, so when I'm meeting so many different people at these farmers markets, and it's so fascinating to me when they're like, "Do you barter?" I was like, "Hell yeah, I'll barter with you." You know, I mean, I've traded salsa for wood burning signs that this guy makes that I know out at these farmers markets. I've traded salsa for barbecue sauce. I've traded it for honey. I've traded it for all kinds of different things at these farmers markets. Bartering to me is the way to go, especially if you got enough people in this community that can work together and trade their services with one another. All right. But there's a hang up when it comes to like the monetary side of this. It's like, well, but I still like to have my money too. You know, what I don't need, what if I don't want salsa? Okay, that's cool. But you might need something that Joseph can provide. You know, so, and I think if you got enough people in this community that can serve one another, the monetary side of it to me is just, I can't wrap my brain around why people think that's so necessary. When all of your needs are being met in this community, why is money so important? It shouldn't be, it shouldn't matter at this point. If you are living and you are being sheltered and you got friends and you got family around you and you're living, what else do you need? Do you need to be Donald Trump rich? Do you need that kind of money? Why? If your needs are being met. And I think that's where the hang up comes from, this whole idea that, well, what if I don't need what this person provides? You're going to need something from somebody in this community, I promise you. And you can provide something to them as well.
I think that definitely is one of the hangups that people come across. It's their money. And sometimes to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense either. You know, one of the things I look at, so like, let's say tomorrow that there's a dozen people who are like, oh yeah, let's do this. Let's all get in, and you and me and 10 other people all get together and we start a community. Like, people don't realize that a lot of it, I can still keep my job. And frankly, I'm willing to if it means that helps us pay for the property. You know, I work remotely. I make a decent salary. I'm in data science. Like, I don't, my wife doesn't work because she doesn't have to. I do live in a rural area of Florida where the cost of living's lower too. And we're also pretty frugal. To your point, we don't need to get the newest and best everything. We don't need to get a brand new, and that's part of the problem is some people just need all this crap that they just get bogged down that I need to buy. You know, this is a $10 shirt, you know, like but some people are like, oh, I spent $100 on this shirt and $500 on these jeans. I think it's the whole mindset. It's the whole culture we're in America that is just made people unwilling to even consider. Because to your point, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm fed, if my wife's fed, if our son is fed, and then we can take care of our animals who coincidentally help feed us, like, then that's all that matters. Like, that's what's important. And then as we build, we get to do more. You know, the other thing I look at is these communities. It's like, people miss out on so much opportunity, I think, again, because they become so self-focused to the extent that, like, well, I'm just worried about me. I need to make sure it's my money. I have my private property, my this, that, where I think these sort of communities, I actually have a vision of a sort of agro-tourism type thing that is on the rise right now. Well, I think you could get people where we just invite people in and teach them, hey, yeah, this is how we live. So you can come learn, milk a goat, collect some eggs. We have a gardening thing. Come stay with us for a weekend. You pay us to stay for the weekend. We teach you these skills. And it's like, why wouldn't someone want to be a part of a community like that where we teach other people to build other communities like this? And we're just self-sufficient. And again, to your point, there's no need. The money factor isn't a big thing. And frankly, there's always going to be enough. Like, you can sell your salsa and you can make enough to pay for your whatever streaming service you need to watch the football game. You know, like, I sell a few books, and that's enough to support the internet access I need to be able to do this, right? Like, we don't need that much. And I think on the flip side, we also underestimate or we overestimate how much time it takes to do a lot of stuff. Like, I have a full-time job. We have a toddler. We do not have daycare. We do not have any support. Again, my wife does stay home full-time. But she's the primary caregiver. And then all the cooking, the cleaning, the property maintenance of the 5 acres, the goats, the chickens, the dog, the cats, like everything falls under that. Plus I write. I mean, I do have this fantasy thing that I write all these books. And I also have to spend time marketing. The point is that, like, I think some people think that, oh, well, if I get chickens, my whole social life's gone. I can't go up yet. It's like, it's not like that. Like, it's a lot of these things, you can actually do a lot to become self-sufficient and contribute to that community in just a couple hours. And everyone has that. Again, look at how busy you are, working 60 hours a week, making hundreds of jars of salsa, recording these podcasts. Like, I think people have become just trapped in their own brain because they get told, oh, and they get exhausted, I think, is part of it. I actually wonder if the TV is part of it. They hear the news, they hear all this bad, negative stuff. They go on their phone, they scroll, they see all this terrible stuff, and it just brings them down, and they think, oh, well, I can't do it. I can't make a difference. I can't get a goat and milk it. I can't take care of some chickens. You can. It's not that hard.
Well, there's a couple points, but because I think you said something very important. You can still keep your job and live in this community too. I think that was a very important thing for you that you said, because if you want to work 100 hours a week, which it feels like I do, when it comes to the salsa, when it comes to my regular job, I mean, to be fair, my regular job does pay for my house. My regular job keeps the lights on, keeps my cats fed. You know what I'm saying? The salsa stuff, the podcast stuff is extra. And it's extra, but it's there's a purpose behind it.
Yeah.
The message of No King But Christ is so important to me that I'm willing to put in that work to do it. You know what I'm saying? So I think you are right. I do work a ton. And I am exhausted. I think you're right, too. The TV might play a part of that. I just watched my Cowboys get destroyed by your brother's Saints a while ago. And that's why I broke up with the Dallas Cowboys last year. But the whole idea that you'd have to give up your lifestyle to live in this community, I don't think that's correct. I think you could still work your job if you want to keep your job. And who knows, if the community grows, you get to a point where your job is not necessary. I mean, I love the idea, the way the salsa thing's going. I love the idea of just making salsa as being my primary job. And it could, if I really wanted to get serious about it and put it in stores, I mean, it could be lucrative. The way it's going, it is blowing my mind to watch how this is going. My problem is that I don't want the government involved with it. So if I wanted to put it in stores, I'd have to go start making it in a commercial kitchen. Otherwise, they're going to come in my house and inspect my house. Now, Tennessee has what's called a cottage law, and salsa falls underneath that, where you can make salsa at home and sell it. But I don't want the government in my house inspecting my house. I'd have to send it off and get it analyzed and get the ingredients on, because everything I've tried to get it in stores, and everything I run into every time, well, is it legal? Man, you don't know who you're talking to when you ask me that question. That just really bothers me. But getting back to this whole discussion, we can do this if we got serious about it. And it doesn't mean you have to give up your job. Now, it could get to a point where the job is just, it's pointless. Why do you want to kill yourself 100 hours a week working when you can live in a community where everything's provided for? You know what I'm saying? I think that's just one of the hangups, that I think people need to let's take a step back and think about what Joseph is talking about today. It's not a bad idea. It's a great idea. It's just going to take a little bit of work, especially in the beginning. I mean, if it's worth having, it's going to be work. And I don't think, and the vast majority of people I know in this community are hard workers. They have no problem putting in the effort, especially when it comes especially when it comes to No King But Christ, if it's important to them. But the whole, the idea of community building, I think we could get a lot of people together that have no problem working. Now, the idea of getting everybody in one location is a little, that's a little difficult because you're in Florida. I'm in Tennessee. My buddy Dennis, who I was talking about earlier, lives in Georgia. Where do we do this at? You know, Dennis sent me a message the other day about some property in Alabama. And I immediately thought about you. And that's how I wanted y'all to connect, because you've been talking about this. This is something he talks about. But how do you get people centralized in one area?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Especially if we're so far apart. And who decides? Who decides where this property's at? You know what I'm saying? That could be another hang up.
That's where, admittedly, that's the hardest part for me to solve for right now. And part of that is because all my family is down here in Florida, right? So I have my brother who's in St. Pete, and my sister's in St. Pete, and then another sister in Palm Harbor, and my parents in Palm Harbor, mother and father-in-law are in St. Pete, and everyone's down there. And now we're up, we're 3 hours north of them, in a town called Bell. But yeah, on one hand, it's like, I don't know if we can realistically leave Florida. Like, can we really get land outside of Florida? And will, part of me still dreams that once we get set up, we could be like, see, look, and I could get my family to come on over and join us. But it's like, I don't know how much of that is actually going to happen. And then, yeah, it's a difficult thing. And long term, I'm also, as far as I'm concerned, if family wasn't a factor, I'd be happy to move to Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, anywhere that's going to offer the ability to kind of build it out. And part of the thing is, it's not like we can secede from the union or something. I don't want a Waco situation or some crazy, like we don't need that. But at the same time, I think we could get to the community to a point where almost none of us have to worry about. All we have to do is pay the stupid property taxes to whatever local mafia wants to steal from us. And then mostly that's it, because we can barter everything internally. But what I will say in terms of location, again, so short version is I'm still trying to figure that out too. And that is the hardest part. But I will say in terms of location is a Tennessee, a Florida, somewhere in that range where we have a long growing season, where we have somewhat mild weather. Like even where you are, it doesn't snow every year, does it?
But yeah, I mean, it snows, but it's not Alaska.
It's not like the ground's covered for that. That's to me, that, especially for just a practical, self-sufficient community, a place where the snow's not setting on the ground for months at a time is a better place, because you can grow a lot more. You can actually be more self-sufficient more easily.
It reminds me of, how people always hit us with, if you don't like it, then leave. And I'm like, you really underestimate my willingness to leave this godforsaken country. You're not threatening me with anything. You're actually threatening me with a good time. I know a lot of people that have moved to Mexico. They're like, why would you want to go to Mexico? It's cheap down there. You can live very cheap in Mexico. And there's a lot of beautiful land down in Mexico. Now, yeah, there's a world of cartels. Like, we have the United States government that is worse than the Mexican cartel. I mean, come on. Don't tell me about that stuff. It's dangerous here living in America because of the government we live under. So don't all that nonsense is like, I just miss me with that. You're gonna have to come up with something better. We'll move to Somalia. I don't want to move to Somalia. They're getting bombed by the United States government.
Yeah, why would I move somewhere where this country is murdering people in masses there?
Why would I want to be a victim of American foreign policy? What are you telling me? That doesn't make any sense. Hey folks, do you like salsa? I love salsa. I have come up with a fire recipe, and we have been shipping this homemade salsa all across the country. If you like salsa and want a cool way to support the project and spread the message of no king but Christ, then holler at us. You can reach us at badromansalsa@gmail.com or visit the official Bad Roman Salsa Facebook page and message us there. Thank y'all so much for your continued support. Now let's get back to the show. All right, let's get into these notes you sent me. So the first one is the core role of a Christian. And he said, as seen throughout Scripture and especially highlighted in Acts, a Christian's primary role is to spread the gospel. Unfortunately, many people pick and choose how they wish to do this, often looking back to the Old Testament for guidance. This allows them to justify violence and authoritarian rule, trying to force people to follow Christ. Then you started these notes with this leading into building a Christian community. Let's start there. A core role of a Christian is to spread the gospel. When you think about this community that you want to start or want to build upon, does it start with the gospel? Does it start with no king but Christ? Does it start with the good news of the new kingdom?
Yes. No, yeah, absolutely.
No, I love it, but what if there's somebody who's not a Christian that wants to come into this community? How does that play? Do they have to be a Christian to be part of this community? But I'm not trying to back you in a corner, but I think it's a fair question.
No, that is a great question, and so I'd give two answers though, and I'm not trying to take the political out. I will answer this, but one answer is what I'm going to say, and then the other is just because I say it one way doesn't mean you have to do it. Frankly, you can have a community that's all Italian people if you really want to. Like, just went with that because my last name and the ethnic heritage. But like, I don't think that's necessary. I think you're kind of being silly at that point. But so no, I'd say in my head, I don't mind necessarily if somebody is Christian if they live Christian. And I think that would make sense to you. If they live like a Christian should live, and Christ taught us to live, I don't care if they say they're an atheist, as long as they live in that kind of fashion. I think some communities, they might be better off organizing in like, oh, we just believe people who are firm believers come here. There'd probably be Torah observant communities and whatnot. But I think everyone should do, like, I think everyone should follow this motto. I think small communities are the way that we save society to some extent. That's a little bit dramatic to say it that way, but like, I think that's where it is.
It's true. I mean, it's true though. I mean, it doesn't sound dramatic to me. It is true. And what you said about like atheists, some of the most peaceful, loving people I know are atheists. Yeah. And so living a life that is peaceful. Yeah. And if they don't believe the way I do, if we're getting along, man, I'll be your friend. Let's go. Let's have a good time.
Right. Yeah. I'd much rather an atheist neighbor who's not going to pillage me because I disagree on some key issue than some Christian who wants to steal my stuff and reappropriate it for God's cause because they disagree with me drinking or something. Like.
Well, I was having a conversation with an atheist the other day, actually, and just listening to him talk and to listen to him how he viewed the Bible and how he viewed the teachings of Christ. They don't have a problem with Jesus and the teachings of Jesus. They have a problem with Christians.
Yep.
And it reminds me of what Gandhi said. I like your Christ, but I don't like your Christianity. And I told him, I was like, man, I got to be honest with you. I wish more Christians behave like you do. I know a lot of hateful Christians. And we see it more and more. I mean, this is an election year, but at the time of this recording, it's going to be, maybe we're going to publish it right after the election. But during the election time, dude, Christians can be very, very hateful people. And I made a post earlier. I was like, if you're going to go vote for somebody who's a known warmonger / criminal and call yourself a Christian, don't be surprised when somebody on the outside looking in calls you on your bullshit, because your witness is weak. If you're going to represent the teachings or represent what Jesus wants us to do, and you're going to go vote for somebody like that, and an atheist who is peaceful, who doesn't vote, doesn't participate in the mafia, sees you participating in it and voting for somebody who's behaving that way, don't be surprised when they call you on your bullshit. And rightfully so. They should call them on their bullshit. Yeah. I call them on their bullshit all the time, but I really like it when somebody on the outside looking in calls them on their bullshit because they can't answer it. Well, you're an atheist. Maybe, but I'm living more peaceful than you are as a professing Christian.
No, you're absolutely right though. And yeah, so for me it would be it's not as big a deal as long as you're living the right, like, again, we don't want to, I don't want to build a community where somebody's going to be like, oh yeah, Donald Trump. Like, I don't want any of them in my community. And I don't want anyone who's going to say, oh yeah, Kamala Harris. I don't want any of them in my community. Because all of them are a bunch of Vikings. They just want to rape and pillage us and take our to do whatever they crazy crap they want to do.
I don't want anybody in my community that's going to vote for Donald Trump or Kamala.
Well, frankly, anyone who thinks they want to vote just doesn't belong in this community, because it's a community of Christ, and
All right, let's jump into building a Christian community. We're kind of talking about it now, but you said, considering the way Christ traveled while on earth and the community he kept, coupled with the church shown in the book of Acts, it becomes clear how to most effectively spread the gospel. And that truth is to live the gospel. Now, I'm hesitant to call out individual passages from Scripture, mainly because people so often cherry pick to use them as weapons. One passage I've been especially drawn to recently is James 1:19 through 27. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, the one of the biggest parts of that passage is just we should live our faith. Like, our faith isn't just, oh, I believe in Christ. And this actually ties into one of those things that I get. So this is probably the most common thing I see in social media when I talk about no king but Christ. Is which actually I talk about it all the time, but usually I don't get engaged with. But when I rarely get the engagement and people try to push back on it, what they always do is they're like, oh, well, do you not think then that somebody can be a Christian if they vote? Like, if they participate? And I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. You can believe. You can actually have faith in Christ and still be a sinner who does horrible sins. Voting is a sin, though. Like, all of these things are sins. They're affronts. They are disobeying his commands. So you can still believe, and you can still. People are contradictory. We are often hypocritical, and so you can believe in Christ. But I'm sorry, when you go on and on and on, and you never correct your sin of voting, and you never realize that no, we're not supposed to live this way. We're not supposed to say yes. I'm going to steal from them because I don't approve of the way they live. So I'm going to just take their stuff and use it to, and those people in that country, let's bomb them to make sure that we, and when you have that flagrant disregard, no, you can't say that you're following Christ. You can say that you believe in Christ. You can say you have faith that he's God, but it gets to a point where I have to start doubting it because you're living the opposite way. You're living like God is government. You're living like God is money. And that's how most people live their lives, even when they profess themselves as followers of Christ. They either worship money or government or a combination of the two. And then God is just, and Jesus, yay! They just attach his name as like as a political point or something. It's like, no, it's not like that. It's listening to our master. Because I don't remember when Christ said this, but in the Gospels, he says, if you love me, you will keep my commands. Like, if we're not keeping his commands, then no, I'm sorry, we're not. And so one of the reasons I love this is that this passage calls that out, right? It says, verse 23, for if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror, for he looks at himself, verse 24, for he looks at himself and goes away, at once forgets what he was like. It's like this insane, look at me, I'm a Christian, but no action, no follow through, no commitment, and I think this passage calls that out.
I've gotten to the point now when I'm talking to another Christian when it comes to this topic of no king but Christ, and they're still running to the voting booth, they're still participating in the mafia, they're giving their agency to the government, and they're basically selling their soul to the government. I love them, but I don't take them seriously. Yeah. And I've seen it a lot now in like I said, during an election year. And I'm seeing a lot of Christians who I had a ton of respect for before, who are reverting back into this statism. They're reverting back into this because I don't understand it, and I've lost respect for them. I don't take them seriously anymore. When they, like you said, they are believers, but they're not following what Jesus said. When Jesus said, "Not so among you," he was very specific. When he pulled his disciples aside and said, "Not so among you," that was not a suggestion. He said, "No, you will not behave this way." And so when I'm talking to Christians or professing Christians, when it comes to this topic, when it comes to participating in this stuff, I just don't take them seriously. I just got through with a conversation right before we came on this very topic. And I told him, I was like, I can't take you seriously. I shared scripture with him. I shared the words of Jesus Christ, the King himself, with him, and he danced all around it. I said, I can't take you seriously. If you're not going to address the very words of Christ, who you claim to follow, I can't take you seriously. Now, to be fair, I'm not a very good Christian. I mean, I fail daily, but there's one thing that I can do is not participate in the mafia, and I can follow just Jesus as my king. If that's the best I can do, then that's the best I can do. There's things I'm going to do that are contrary. Like you said, hypocritical. Yes, I can be a hypocrite. I don't want to be, but I fail. I fall all the time. But the whole idea, and I learned this, I don't know why it took me almost 50 years to learn what exactly repent meant. We hear it all the time. It just means simply go a different direction. Turn around and go a different direction. That's all it is. And so all my past life of being and participating in it as a voter and all that stuff, all I did was just go a different direction. I just turned around and went back to my king. That's it. But I think it's very important for Christians who listen to this, who they share this with, and I hope they share this with people. Hear me when I say this. If you are participating in the voting, if you're participating in politics, you are not following the commands of Jesus. And like you said, if you love me, you will follow my commands. Do you love Jesus? And that's not me trying to put a guilt trip on anybody. These are the words of Christ.
Exactly.
These are not the words of Joseph. These are not the words of Craig. Jesus said this. Let's get back to Jesus. Man, I've derailed this conversation like 17 times so far, haven't I?
No, this is all related. Like, this is all important to the conversation.
You just happened to jump on a show with me after I got done arguing with another Christian. So everybody's getting the end story of Craig coming on a podcast after he got done arguing with a fellow Christian. Anyway,
I'm here for it. I think this is great. Yeah, I don't know. Again, like you said, people try to really dance around it and find all sorts of loopholes and conveniences. Or I think what it comes down to, and the unfortunate reality is just people are afraid, kind of like I mentioned earlier. They have these conveniences. They have these modern things that they're attached to. And when you peel back the curtain, you realize that there is some sacrifice. Like you said earlier, it will take work. It will take a lot of hard work to build this sort of community. It will. And it will take there's going to be some stepping out on a limb and taking the risk and being like, yeah, we're going into this together. You know, we have to have some mutual trust, everyone in this community, that we're all on the same page and we're all committed to a positive outcome where we build this Christ-centric community, which, again, you know, that's the other thing in terms of doing, and now I'm jumping a little bit, but I got to share it while it's on my head, is you build that sort of community. Think of the impact you can have for that local area. Because what inevitably ends up happening is, I said earlier, not everyone has to do everything, but inevitably there's going to be an excess of eggs. There's going to be an excess of peppers. There's going to be an excess of oranges, whatever. And think if we want, we can just decide, hey, we're just going to give these to the local community. Anyone who needs some food here, just come and eat. Like, come stay here. Come, somebody who's homeless, come stay the night. And like, let's feed you. Let's teach you some skills. Let's get you out there. Or that's one of the things. Now I'm really jumping ahead, and maybe we're is it in this series I'm writing. I get into that in the second. I don't think I get into it in the first book, which is what this is about. So I'm jumping ahead. But in the second book, I get into how, like, there are people in that community who were literally they were beggars and homeless people. But it was like, oh, do you want to do something? Yeah, I'd love to contribute. Like, people who would do stuff. We get this terrible idea, and I know personally some people who fall into this, that homeless people don't want to work and they're afraid of responsibility. And again, I know some homeless people who are like that. That they do exist. But I don't think that's the norm. I think a lot of people do want to contribute. They want to work. And even sometimes the people who are in that boat where they don't want to, it's because life has just beaten them to such an extent that they're tired. They don't know what to do. And all they know what to do is it's to lay back and be like, I'm done. I can't contribute. I'm worthless anyways. So just let it go. I think we can lift those people up. And I think it starts by, again, forming that community. And instead of being misers and like, one of the things I mentioned in that document I sent you, like, no, it's not. Some people are going to be putting in more. Some people are going to be putting in more money. They're going to be putting in more effort. Good. If you're a Christian, you should be proud of that. Like, I want to. I've told my wife this before. I want Everath to be so big that I can just get all my friends and family and everyone I care about can just take advantage of me. And I don't. Why? Because they bring joy to my life. They contribute something. So I don't care if I'm getting the better end of the deal or they're really getting a way better deal. I don't care. As long as my family's provided for, as long as I'm not starving, as long as I'm not having rainwater fall on my head at night, like, why do I care if somebody else gets a better deal than me?
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. Very cool, because we shouldn't care if people are, the word jealousy comes to mind. And why do we care if somebody's doing better? We should be happy.
Yep.
We should be happy that people are benefiting off of the fruits of our labor. I mean, one of the things that Jesus instructed us to do, and you mentioned it, is to feed them.
Yep.
Take care of them. And if you've been blessed, if you've been given this from God, what are you supposed to do with it? Store it up? Save it?
Pretty sure there's a parable about that.
Yeah. There is a parable about that. The whole idea is to share it, to give it away. I'm the same way, man. I mean, I like to be comfortable. I like to live comfortably. Don't get me wrong, but I don't need to live in a mansion on a hill somewhere. I don't need that. As long as I can eat and I have a bed to sleep in, man, I'm cool. I mean, I don't want for a whole lot of things. The idea that we need more stuff is just so silly to me. And I get it. I mean, it's nice to have a nice TV, I guess, but these days a TV doesn't even cost that much money.
Well, and that's the other thing. I do feel like I have it easier now because 100 years ago, yeah, maybe this would have been harder to propose for people to form a society like this, right? Like now it is easy. Like you said, TVs you spend a few $100. You don't even I sell one Nigerian dwarf doling. I make enough to buy a TV. That's all I need is to breed one and sell one of the kids, and hopefully they have 2, 3, 4 kids. So it's just one of 2, 3, 4.
I mean, I bought a TV. It's a 50-inch TV in my living room, and I bought it for $200 or $300. It was, and there was a time when that thing would cost thousands of dollars. I don't feel bad about buying a 50-inch TV either. I don't watch it. I'm not home enough to watch it. It seems like a waste of money now, but at the same time, it's there when I do get to spend some time at home. Yeah. But yeah, I think the idea that we do run into that a lot. And I see a lot of people too that seem so focused. They've got their phone in their hand. And they're so,
yeah,
they need the next fancy thing all the time. And I think it's unnecessary, and I'm not trying to sound like a boomer either. I don't want to hope that I come across as a boomer. I mean, it's nice to have something that works, and as long as it's working properly, cool. Hey, folks, we have set up a very simple way to donate to the Bad Moment Project through spotfund.com. Just go to SpotFund and search No King But Christ. This has become necessary to continue to provide a quality podcast and keep production costs down as well. Just $5 or $10 a month will go a long way in helping us keep this project going and continue spreading the very basic message of No King But Christ. So if you like what we were doing and can find it within your budget, go to spotfund.com and search No King But Christ, and you can set up monthly donations or even donate one time. Any and all donations help more than you know. And as always, any donations above production costs will go directly to charities in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank y'all so much. Now back to the show. Let's jump ahead in your notes. And when we get done here, I want you to, share your email address or something so people can reach out to you and you can send these notes to them too if they want to look more into this, because I think it's important, because we're not going to be able to cover all of it. But I want to talk about Marfteport. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, Marfteport. So it's not even a real place, but this is part of your book, your part of your trilogy. So talk about Marfteport. When you talk about building a community like this.
Yep. Yeah. So one of the things I'll say just to lay the foundation. So Marfteport is, so it's the fictional voluntarist community in the world of Everath. It's the first voluntarist community. And so at the end of that first Everath trilogy, that's where some of the main characters are actually leaving to move to Marfteport. And they're like, hey, we're getting out of the Elvish kingdom. It's evil, corrupt, so we want to be somewhere where it's free. And, the first thing, so a fun note, Marfteport is just based off of one of the least important things to me, which may bother some people, so I may not get some readers from this. So everyone knows Tolkien is, the grandfather of fantasy, right? And Tolkien built a language and then built a universe around it. Well, I kind of did the opposite. I built a universe and I said, language is not that important to me. So like Marfta just happens to be one of the months. And I made its own calendar, because if you think about our human calendar, it wouldn't make sense for a fantasy world to have our same calendar, because it's all named off of human stuff, right? So they have their own calendar. And so Marfteport, I just came up with a bunch of words, and Marfta is the one that means like chaos or disorder or whatnot. So the founder of Marfteport did it a little bit tongue-in-cheek. So the founder of Marfteport is a lizard, which is a lizard person, not like the conspiracy theory lizard people from space who control Earth. They're just in Everath. Again, there's centaur, there's satyr, there's cat people, there's all sorts of fantasy creatures, right? You have to remember the set. But so this lizard guy, he's a prince of the lizard kingdom, Lizak, but I'll just say lizard for people who might be easier. So he's this lizard prince, and he leaves his kingdom, and he's like, he grows up being groomed to be the king. He sees the injustice. He actually gets friendly with all the help, and he brings a lot of them with them to start this Marfteport community. And so then a lot of people, elves and Felite, the cat people, all them start immigrating there and start building out this community. And so the whole community is just founded on the idea that, again, there's no rulers, there's no masters. Everyone gets to have their own lot in life. Nobody has to, even though Vistoro's his name, the Lizard guy. And this is one of the things that I do want to bring up. Even though this guy's some millionaire in today's standards, we don't need that to get this started, right? So in his case, he's a rich guy. But even in his universe, it's not like his money is what got the community started. It was the fact that he got all these servants and people who knew hard work to move with him and build this community out, right? Because again, you don't need as much money as people think. It's more just time, and there is some money nowadays, obviously. So again, first voluntary community. The one thing I do in Everath, in the Legends of Everath, is I kind of flesh this out. So again, this is a fantasy novel. It still has the classic good versus evil fantasy adventure aspect to it. So really what you find is, as you read through, so there's 4 books in this series, as you read through, you'll see more and more aspects of the society get built out. But essentially what it is more, yes, they will use capital to exchange. So you could call them capitalist. But most trade happens through bartering. Most trade happens on credit, sometimes even. So like in the first book, it centers around this human farmer called Jaldor. So he has a farm and he farms dairy. So a little bit of a relation there. I'm not quite what he is, but my goats, he has cows. But his farm is attacked by this evil force. Some of the good guys from Marfteport come protect him. And they say, hey, you should come move here because, your farm is destroyed and we have this community to be a part of, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go into too much detail. But essentially with that, it's just, you get to see that this community is not, when he's first building the main blacksmith there, this dwarf that drinks a lot and loves Jaldor's cheese. Those are his two distinguishing qualities. Big red beard, drinks a lot, and loves cheese.
Sounds like me.
Yeah.
You wrote about me in your book.
Yeah, there you go. So you got, I don't know if you're a dwarf, though. I'm pretty sure you're taller.
Yeah, I'm 6'3",
So you're just a very tall version of this guy. Like, for instance, he gives a bunch of nails and stuff ahead of time. And the expectation is, oh, well, you'll pay me back with cheese. And again, it's that community aspect of like, there's not a strict ledger, and there's not a like, oh, well, you owe me $5, so I'm gonna kind of be a little bit of a dick to you until you pay me back. Like, no, it's just mutual respect, everyone's trying to do their best. And so again, this community is a backdrop to the whole story. You get to learn more about it throughout, but essentially it's just people who are, obviously they're not Christian because it's a different universe, but they were, the goddess of Everath is the creator of that world, and she is basically, her philosophy is Christian philosophy. So they all try to love their neighbors and live in that fashion. I just don't know why it's, again, so hard for people to take that leap. And so part of the reason I write this is just to show, I know it's fantasy, so people will say, oh, well, it's just fantasy, you just wrote it that way. But like, these people are different species. Like, there's dog people, cat people, elves, human. They can all do it. Why can't we?
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea behind writing the book this way. It's like, look, if all these diverse species can get along and live in a cooperative society, why can't we?
Right.
And again, there's the backdrop of conflict with these evil overlord that wants to rewrite the world in his image. But
so this is a question that comes up a lot with people when it comes to this idea of community building. A voluntary society is what this sounds like. So what happens, or how do you deal with somebody who gets a little sideways, who doesn't follow, who's not living according to what you would want in this community? How do you deal with a person who gets sideways? And it's a fair question. I mean, it's something that I think a lot of people, that's another hang up with people when it comes to this. How do you deal with somebody who gets a little sideways?
So there's a few different ways to answer this. And the hard part is, what is a little sideways versus, I've often been posed the harder way. It's like, well, what do you do when there's a guy in your community who drives drunk and kills kids and just does it over and over?
Yeah.
It's like, look, when you
I was being cautious about what sideways means, but it could mean a whole lot of different things.
Well, right. So, like, depending on the extent, it can get into a situation where it's like, look, I can't answer every possible scenario. What I will say is that getting into this scenario, I think everyone needs to be on the same page. And while I don't think we need to be strict about like, oh, perfect equity and this, that, I think we do need to have certain code of conduct, if you will, that everyone who's part of this community accepts and says, yes, I'm willing to live this way. And so when someone deviates from that, I think, first of all, the first thing is just, you're their neighbors, is to talk to them. Like, that's step one, is just say, hey, dude, what's going on? Why have you started to, instead of, you were supposed to be the guy who does the butchering, and now instead of butchering animals, you've started to just take pictures of animals in clothes. You started to dress up the animals. Why aren't you butchering? I don't know. I'm coming up with an absurd one, but or you're just drinking too much and you're not producing. You're not doing your end of the bargain. I don't know. Whatever it is, the first thing is to talk to them, and not just talk to them, but come with it from a Christian perspective of being like, what's up? Like, a lot of the times when people deviate or go off, is because there's something else going on, and they just need someone to talk to them and listen to them and understand. I think so often we demonize people for aberrant behavior. And it's like, maybe if you got to understand why they started behaving in that way, you could get it solved without too much of an issue. Like, a lot of the times I think it is that simple. And again, people will be, oh, well, that, what if they go to the extreme and they start murdering someone? Sometimes you just got to act in the moment. We can go down this tangent if you want. I don't know if we have the time, but I disagree a little bit with you on the term pacifism. By your definition, I am a pacifist. I never get that. Is most people hear that, they think that you will not defend yourself. Like if you say you're a pacifist, they think, oh, you won't even lift up your hands and prevent yourself. No, I'm a pacifist, but I will fight back if I need to, especially if it means protecting my family or my community, like protecting other people, which is another. I'm willing to take more myself than I am let other people take. Like, I'll be bullied, but you try to bully one of my neighbors, I'm going to get in your face and be like, get out of here.
Well, with the pacifism thing, I'm with you. I'm not saying I wouldn't defend myself either. When it comes to pacifism, I'm just not going to kill you back.
Yeah.
That's where my pacifism is. And that's why I was trying to, spend some time learning jujitsu, which I no longer have time for, but I was trying to learn it because to me it was a peaceful way to end an altercation. You can put somebody to sleep very quickly, and it's over. You're not going to kill them, but they're going to go to sleep for a little bit. And when they wake up, the situation's over.
Yeah.
Pacifism was explained to me by a couple different people. Abby Kleckner and Brexit Cavey was taught, you're actively seeking peace. That does not by any means mean that I will not defend myself. I will get cross with you if you get cross with me, but I'm not going to kill you back. That's where my pacifism is. That's the whole idea. Don't kill them back. And I will get in the way and I will defend somebody else, even if it means me losing my life. That's where my pacifism is. I will defend my neighbor. I will defend my friend. I will defend my family, even if it means me losing my life. But I'm not willing to kill anybody back. I won't do it.
No, and that again, by that, I'm in agreement with you on that. Like that's how I think most people hear pacifism, they think you won't even fight.
And some people do take it to that extreme. To be fair, some people do, and
yeah,
that's cool. But I'm not. I don't lay down very easily, so I will fight back, but I'm not going to kill you back. If somebody finds it necessary to kill me, that's between them and God. That's something about me is I don't really fear death. I mean, it's not. I know what happens in the end. I'm not.
Yeah.
This is temporary.
Yeah, it's funny. I have more of a fear of death now that I have a son, because before that I was like, yeah, my wife, she can take care of herself if I die. With him, it's like, oh, now it's not just her. Now she has to not take care of him without me.
Well, just make sure you got a decent life insurance policy, And I'm the same way too. And I've told people over and over, I said, if something happens to me, please make sure somebody takes good care of my cats.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm serious about that because I do worry about that. I mean, I know it sounds strange to people; they're just animals. I was like, but they're my kids. I mean, I've got one that's 17 years old. I've had this cat for 17 years.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
And I've got one that's 14 years old. I've had these animals for a long time. So if something happens to me, make sure these animals are taken care of, because it's important for me to know that if I'm dying, it's important for me to know that they're going to be taken care of. That's it. That's all I really want to happen.
No, so going back to your question, so like in the Legends of Everath, in Marfteport, one of the things they do is the Mages Guild, for instance, has a dungeon underneath, and it's supposed to be reserved for like if a member starts doing necromancy or starts trying to mind control one of the other members or starts trying to murder people. But they have a very strict code of conduct that like this is what puts you down there, and this is. But it's also not just you get locked down there and you're left there to rot. It's you get thrown in there and we intervene and try to get you back on the right path. So I guess to answer your question, that is to me the first step. And again, there's probably people listening who'll be like, well, what if they do this? And what if again, I can't answer everything in every scenario, but the first step is just we're neighbors. And
I think you're right. You deal with things as they come along. And, when we had a recent episode with Jeff Perry from Voluntarism in Action, where we talked about like voluntary policing and stuff. And I think that's something that could be a part of a voluntary society. Also, there's also a book by Robert Murphy called Chaos Theory that kind of lays out how this would look like as well if somebody gets a little sideways. If I'm remembering correctly, it's been a while since I read the book, but it's all based around like an insurance type deal. Like I don't want to misrepresent the book because it's been a minute since I read it, but it's a good book to read if people want to get an understanding of what it would look like in a voluntary society. Somebody gets a little sideways.
I should probably check that book out.
It's a good book. It's a great book. I mean, It answers a lot of questions that we've talked about today, actually. I mean, if people are interested, if they haven't read it yet. But, if not, go check out the Jeff Perry episode, too, because he laid it out pretty good, too, as well.
But yeah, so that's, again, but pretty much it starts with just, we all get into this community. We all agree that we have a certain outcome. So the first step, we're all adults. The first step is just talking and just opening up like, hey, this is what we agreed to, what's going on. And I do think a lot of the times when people go sideways, it's just some friendship is all they need to kind of turn it back around. I really do. I think we get too trapped. And again, people will call me naive, but I think it's the opposite. I think we get conditioned to being told that people need to have a threat of eternal damnation or a threat of thrown in prison where you're going to get raped and beaten. Like, I don't actually think that's the case. I think most of the time people can find their way if you just approach them like Christ told us to, where we just love them. I think love solves more problems than we give it credit for.
Well, and it's in everybody's best interest to just get along.
Yeah, it really is.
Even with the person that's getting a little sideways. I mean, there's people out there that are just not ever going to get it, and that's part of it. And I guess that's when they're not part of the community anymore.
I was going to. Usually, the people who are like, "But well, what about this? What about that? What?" Okay, you're not a good candidate to be part of this community because you're going to be the one stirring up trouble, apparently. And that to me is when they start going these crazy theoreticals. I'm like, okay, so you're the problem then. You realize it's not, because most people don't think like that. They don't try to create issues. It's these people who try to come up with these asinine problems and drama. It's like, I've never encountered that in the real world. Yeah, I've seen that in some shitty movie where they had to create artificial drama, but nobody behaves like that. Like, normal people, again, they and part of it's because people are a little bit selfish for the most part.
I disengage pretty quickly when people start talking about theoretical stuff. I'm like, I get it. There's bad actors out there, but you're talking about something that hasn't happened yet, and you're just you're planning on something happening that doesn't have to happen. There's no point in having this conversation if you're going to start bringing up theoretical stuff. I mean, that's silly, and I've been called naive quite a bit too when it comes to this topic. I've talked about this with folks. We've talked about it in the discussion group, and my friend Cheryl, who handles some of the artwork on her social media, I said, am I being naive? She goes, maybe you're just being idealistic.
Yeah,
and I think that's cool. We got some ideas. Let's flesh it out and see what happens. Maybe I am naive. I don't know. I don't care. But I think it's a good discussion to have. At least let's talk about it. At least we're talking about it now. And hopefully people, when they listen to this, they'll start thinking about it a little bit more.
And what is there to get? A lot of the times, and I get it because I am pretty risk adverse, but a lot of times I think we let our fear just prevent us from moving forward. And frankly, what I just said about me being pretty risk adverse, I'm pushing myself a lot lately, and I'm challenging that because guess what? Every time I open up my Bible, all I see is "do not fear," like be bold. So I don't know.
You were not created with a spirit of fear. Yeah, if you're living with the idea of fear all the time, you're not ever going to progress into a better life.
Exactly.
You have to move forward. You have to move forward and say, you know what? And I told you this one time. I said, we got to start being bold and being outspoken about this stuff. We have to be bold. Yeah. Otherwise, people are going to call us on our bullshit. If we're not being bold, if we're not progressing into something better because we're afraid of something else, I won't buy into that. I wouldn't buy into that. We could go on for hours, man. And I want to wrap this up and let you get back to your family. Why don't you plug whatever you want to plug, and then your email address so people can reach out to you to get these notes if they want to learn more about what you're talking about.
Yeah, so the website's www.everath.com, so that's EVORATH.com. And the email address is just joseph@everath.com. So just JOSEPH@everath.com. That's the easiest way. My book, by the time this is published, will already be released. It's The Shadows of Erythal. It's book 1 of the Legends of Everath. Again, I think you'll enjoy it. If you want to see what my vision of a voluntary's community is, that will be fleshed out throughout those books. The one note I'll say is that my ideal community, me personally, would probably be a little smaller, only because I'm an introvert and I have an easier time with smaller groups of people. But I do believe a community about the size of Marfta Port is feasible for people who like big communities, and that's, I think, the upper limit. And then, yeah, hey, otherwise, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I even have a TikTok that I barely use, all at Everath and at Evortath. And yeah, that's where you can find me. And you'll probably see me occasionally in the Bad Roman discussion group. Feel like lately I haven't been in there as often just because I've not been using social media as often.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I find it interesting because I want people to flesh this stuff out amongst themselves. Sometimes I'm like, some of y'all are missing the point here.
I will as a final thought from my end, I will say that is, I'm with you, Andrew. I love seeing those. I lurk on those conversations all the time. I don't participate because to me, yeah, I love it. I'm constantly trying to dig deeper into theology, better understand, pray a lot, try to listen to the Spirit. I think we all can hear it. Most of the time we ignore it. Most of the time we let doctrine get in the way of what we hear. But we can all hear the Spirit. We can all listen. And I do that a lot, and I love seeing conversation. I don't participate in debate because it's a waste of time. Because what you just said is like they focus on such minute, inconsequential detail most of the time. Christ is king. He's the one and only king. No king but Christ. And let's go from there. Like he is the Alpha, the Omega. That is God. He's the creator. That's why I worship him. That's why he's my master, because he is the creator of us, of everything. But that's it. Like all this other minutia that people get, I do enjoy to some extent looking at that. But I'm not getting caught in that because I don't. It's not that big a deal. Why do we need to fight?
That's one thing I like so much about the salsa stuff, is getting to talk to people face to face at these farmers markets and shaking their hand and talking to them about the Bad Roman Project and explaining to them what we're about. Because when I look at them and I'm like, because we don't participate in voting, we're no king but Christ. We have Jesus as king. Why do we need to seek another king? And when I say it to them like that, the looks, you would laugh at some of the looks that I get from these folks, because it's stuff that they agree with, but they never heard anybody say it. you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, well that was me. Like until I found you pretty early when I was actually, I don't know how true that is, but I was searching for a long time. I'm like, why? Like, am I delusional? Am I crazy? Like I'm reading the Bible, I'm praying, I'm feeling that this is what God's telling me. Like this all is fake. Like this all is not what I should be doing. So when I found I found you through the Christian Anarchist group on Facebook, and then you would post like every episode or something. And so I came across one of your episodes, listened to it, but it was like, yeah, nobody else had ever said that. Like so to me, growing up and you hear all this doctrine and these church people, you get so scared to an extent. You're like, maybe I'm listening to demons, or I'm getting like, what is wrong with me? Nobody else says this. But no, there's a ton of people who say it.
Yeah.
And then I read Tolstoy and started to get, and it's like, oh no, this is stuff that's out there. It's just shunned by main church folk because church folk want power and control. They don't want Christ. They don't want his king.
If you ever really want to screw up your own thinking, go read some early church writings. It will change your life and it will screw you up for the better.
Yep.
It screwed me up for the better. And we have the Bible, but once I started reading like the early church stuff, I was like, man, no, we don't behave this way today in churches. We don't. And we're missing that. And I think if we got back to that, we'd be way better off. The world would be way better off if Christians started behaving the way they did back then.
Yes.
But anyway, man, I really appreciate this. This was fun. I didn't know how it was going to go because we didn't touch on everything, but I think we had a pretty cool conversation. I'll tell you this too. I don't really get into like fantasy writings and stuff, but the way you just talk about this stuff, I'm really kind of interested in your writings. I haven't read any of your stuff yet. I want to now for sure, because I'm really kind of curious about what this looks like in a fantasy world. Let's make it a reality.
Yeah. No, I think this series is the one that, and actually I think I'm going to get more and more so this series is going to really get into community. I think the next one's going to get more into my vision, of that smaller community and how they start organizing.
Awesome.
But yeah.
Well, Joseph, I really appreciate your time and spending some time with me today and having this conversation. And I've really appreciated getting to know you over the past year or so, I guess now. So I really appreciate what you're doing, man. You're working and you're doing the right thing. So keep it up.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me again, and it's been a pleasure.
Yes, sir. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Bad Roman Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcasts to never miss an episode. And while you're at it, if you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, it really helps people find us. 100% of donations are given to local charities in Memphis, Tennessee. To learn more about the Bad Roman Project and to find show notes, please visit thebadroman.com.